My fiancé accidentally sent me a screenshot. Once he buys the house, I'm gone. I just waited. At closing day, she signed the papers, then learned the deed wasn't in her name. When I look back, I can trace the exact moment when my whole life shifted, the second where love and trust dissolved into something cold and calculating. It wasn't a fight, or a scandal, or even an overheard conversation. It was a single screenshot. One tiny slip on her part, one unlucky flick of a finger, and the truth that had been hiding in the shadows came tumbling into the light. At that time, Natalie and I had been engaged for almost a year. We had the picture-perfect relationship, at least from the outside. People admired us. Friends said we were proof that long-term commitment could still be sweet. We'd been together nearly 5 years, and the engagement had seemed like the natural step forward. I thought I knew her. I thought we wanted the same future. And I was stupid enough to believe that the sacrifices I was making were ours, not just mine. The house was the dream. That was her phrase, repeated over and over again until it became the background music of our life. The dream house. She'd scroll through endless listings on her phone, swiping past apartments and cottages with a wrinkle in her nose until she landed on glossy photos of sprawling suburban places. Open floor plans, granite countertops, walk-in closets. She'd sigh dramatically, leaning against me, whispering about where the Christmas tree would go, where we'd raise kids, where we'd host barbecues. She painted the future vividly, and I, like a fool, believed every word. But the truth is, the house wasn't our dream. It was hers. Or rather, it was her ticket out. I didn't realize that until the night the screenshot landed in my phone. That day had been exhausting. I'd been pulling longer hours at work, stacking overtime so we could scrape together enough for the down payment. I wasn't from money. Everything I had, I earned with tired hands and late nights. Natalie, on the other hand, worked part-time in event planning and relied heavily on what I provided. She framed it as temporary, something flexible until after the wedding, when she'd contribute more. I swallowed the excuse because love makes you soft. I didn't mind carrying more of the weight, at least not then. I came home, threw my bag onto the couch, and collapsed. My phone buzzed, and when I checked it, I froze. It was a screenshot. From Natalie. At first, I didn't even understand what I was looking at. It was a cropped piece of her text conversation with someone else. Her friend, I guessed. The line was clear as day, typed in the little bubble at the bottom of the screen. Once he buys the house, I'm gone. I stared at it, reread it, blinked hard like maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But no, it was there in black and white. 5 words. Not our house. Not when we move in. Just her little roadmap to betrayal. Let me buy the house, then she's gone. A chill ran through me. My first instinct was to storm into the kitchen, where she was chopping vegetables, and demand an explanation. But something, call it instinct, call it survival, made me hold back. Instead, I slid the phone into my pocket and walked in calmly, kissed her cheek, asked about her day. She smiled, completely unaware that she'd just handed me the blueprint to her destruction. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every moment of our relationship with a new filter. The way she pushed harder for expensive neighborhoods instead of practical ones. The way she brushed off my concerns about money with phrases like, "You'll figure it out." The way she didn't save, didn't budget, didn't act like someone building a life with me. I realized she was waiting for the payday. For me to secure her the stability she couldn't get herself. And then, once her name was on that deed, she'd vanish. I could have confronted her right there. But instead, I thought about the long game. If she could play me for years, I could play her for a few more months. And if she thought I was blind, I'd make her believe it even harder. The following weeks were surreal. Natalie kept talking about houses, kept pulling me by the hand through open houses and model homes, her eyes glittering with excitement. She'd run her fingers across marble countertops, smile at the realtors, and introduce herself as if she were already the lady of the house. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman deeply in love, building a future. But I knew better now. I knew those smiles weren't for me. They were for the stage she thought she'd be standing on once the deal closed. I started taking mental notes. Every time she mentioned money, I kept track. Every time she casually mentioned her friends, especially one guy I hadn't paid much attention to before, I stored it away. I wasn't a detective, but I was awake now. Wide awake. And what I saw when I looked at her with new eyes scared me. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was already half gone. She'd get texts late at night, laughing at something on her phone. She brushed it off as group chats. I stopped believing her. She started going out more, under the pretense of wedding planning, with her friends. I didn't argue, but I noticed her makeup was heavier, her perfume stronger. She wasn't dressing up for me. But the trick was patience. I didn't want to spook her. So I played the role of the doting fiancé perfectly. I let her think she was in control, that her plan was flawless. And meanwhile, I started mine. The first step was the finances. I met quietly with a lawyer, a real estate specialist, and explained my situation in vague terms. I wanted to buy a house, but I didn't want anyone else's name on the deed. They didn't pry. It's not uncommon, they said, especially when one partner is paying everything. As long as the mortgage and deed were solely in my name, no one else could lay claim. Relief washed through me. I could make this work. At the same time, I ramped up the illusion for her. I nodded when she pushed for bigger houses. I acted concerned when she sighed about wanting security. I even let her pick furniture for a place we hadn't bought yet. She thought she was steering the ship, but I had already built the harbor where she'd crash. One evening, about a month after the screenshot, we were at dinner with her parents. They adored me, or at least, they adored what I could provide. Her father, Frank, raised a glass to me, calling me a hard-working man, a future son-in-law worth trusting. Her mother, Darlene, beamed as Natalie bragged about how close we were to closing on a house. They all smiled at me like I was a golden ticket. I smiled back, hiding the storm in my chest. Because while they toasted to our future, I knew that Natalie had no intention of keeping me in it. And what none of them realized was that when the house papers were signed, she wouldn't be celebrating victory. She'd be staring at the ruins of her scheme. The real turning point came 2 weeks later. Natalie left her laptop open on the coffee table while she showered. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But a notification popped up, and curiosity tugged at me. It was from a man named Troy. The message wasn't explicit, but it was casual in a way that screamed intimacy. Can't wait till you're free. That house will be perfect for you. It hit me like a hammer. She hadn't just planned to leave me. She had already lined someone else up to step in. I didn't know the full details, but the gist was clear. She'd walk away from me the moment she secured the house, and this Troy would be waiting. My anger burned hot, but again, I forced myself to stay cool. Confronting her would only give her a chance to change her strategy. I wanted her to think she was still safe. I wanted her to walk straight into her own trap. So I waited. Every night, I'd sit across from her at dinner, listening to her chatter about wedding colors or mortgage rates, nodding like I was still her devoted fiancé. Inside, I was counting down the days. The house wasn't just a milestone anymore. It was the weapon I'd use to shatter her mask. And when closing day finally came, I was ready. The next morning after finding that message from Troy, I brewed coffee for both of us like nothing was wrong. Natalie padded into the kitchen in her robe, hair damp from the shower, scrolling her phone with that lazy half-smile she always wore when she thought life was unfolding exactly as she wanted. She kissed my cheek, took the mug, and started talking about a new listing she wanted us to see. I nodded, listened, even feigned excitement. Inside, though, I wasn't hearing square footage or curb appeal. I was hearing the countdown. Every word she spoke was another brick in the castle she thought she was building, while I was digging the moat beneath it. Over the next few weeks, I perfected the illusion. I let Natalie drag me to open houses in expensive neighborhoods where the grass looked trimmed by lasers and the driveways sparkled with freshly washed SUVs. She'd beam at realtors, squeezing my arm, whispering little fantasies about us baking cookies in the kitchen or setting up a nursery upstairs. She even started referring to rooms as hers, her office, her walk-in closet, her patio for morning yoga. And I smiled. I smiled so much my jaw ached. But every time she said ours, I replaced it with mine. Every time she said, we'll decorate, I heard, you'll decorate alone. Meanwhile, I was quietly shoring up my defenses. I scheduled a series of discreet meetings with the attorney I'd consulted earlier. We pored over contract details, mortgage stipulations, deed arrangements. I wanted zero cracks. If she thought she'd be on that deed, she was wrong. If she thought she could use marriage or cohabitation laws to wedge herself in later, she was wrong. By the time I was finished, I'd made sure the house would be a fortress with my name engraved on every stone. But Natalie's arrogance grew in proportion to my silence. She mistook my composure for gullibility. One Saturday, she invited her parents to tour a potential property with us. It was a sprawling 2-story home with a massive yard and a finished basement. Frank and Darlene walked through it with starry eyes, as though it was already ours. Natalie played the role of the lady of the manor so convincingly it made my stomach turn. She opened closet doors dramatically, gestured to windows, pointed out the crown molding with all the pride of ownership. At one point, Frank clapped me on the back and said, "You're making the right move, son. You'll be glad you put her name on the deed. Protects both of you, keeps everything fair." I smiled politely, nodding. But inside, I filed the moment away as another reason to stay silent. Natalie hadn't just been plotting with her friends and her side lover. She had her parents convinced too. They thought I was the fool who'd hand her a house on a silver platter. They'd learn soon enough. Around that time, I started catching more signs of her double life. Subtle ones, but undeniable. She'd come home late from bridal fittings, the faint smell of cologne clinging to her. Her phone would buzz with texts she flipped face down instantly. Her laughter grew sharper, less affectionate, like she was entertaining someone else in her head, even when she was sitting across from me. One night, I tested her. I mentioned offhand that my hours at work might be cut back, that money could get tighter before the house closed. Her face flickered just slightly, enough for me to see irritation flash before she covered it with sympathy. She said we'd figure it out, but her voice lacked conviction. I realized then, she wasn't nervous about the future with me. She was nervous about the timeline of her escape. That tiny moment of frustration told me more than any confession ever could. She wasn't in love. She was in business. And in her mind, I was just the investor. But while Natalie schemed, I staged. I let her plan the interiors. We walked through furniture stores where she bounced from display to display, talking about rugs, couches, paint colors. I encouraged her, even jotted down notes. Good idea, I'd murmur, while secretly thinking, decorate it all you want in your head. When the time comes, you'll never touch these walls. I let her host little housewarming previews with her friends, parading them through empty houses, laughing about parties she'd throw. They treated me like a sponsor, a background character, while she shone in the spotlight. It was humiliating in the moment, but I endured, because I knew the ending. Then came the first crack I couldn't have scripted better. I was at the gym late one evening when I overheard two guys talking near the locker room. One of them mentioned a woman named Natalie who had been leading him on. My stomach tightened. I walked out, keeping my face neutral, but I recognized the description. She wasn't just lining up Troy. She was entertaining others too, or at least dangling bait. It struck me then that she wasn't planning a clean break. She was stockpiling options. The house wasn't just her ticket out. It was her bargaining chip, proof of what she could extract from a man before discarding him. That realization didn't break me. It hardened me. Still, I never let her see a flicker of suspicion. In fact, I went further the other direction. I doubled down on kindness. I booked her a spa day when she complained of stress. I surprised her with flowers when she hinted about romance. I acted like a man desperately in love, completely blind to the storm brewing around him. And Natalie, smug and self-assured, believed it. She leaned deeper into her fantasy, unaware that every gift I gave her was another nail in her coffin. There was one night, though, when I almost lost control. We were sitting on the couch, her scrolling her phone, me half watching a game. Her phone buzzed, and she grinned, an unguarded, private grin, the kind that had nothing to do with me. She typed quickly, bit her lip, laughed under her breath. Something snapped in me. I wanted to grab the phone, throw it against the wall, scream about Troy, about the screenshot, about the lies. But I didn't. I stood, stretched, kissed the top of her head, and said I was heading to bed early. She barely looked up, already lost in someone else's attention. Lying awake in the dark, I realized my silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. As long as she thought I was clueless, I could guide her exactly where I wanted. By the time February rolled around, we were deep into negotiations for a house she adored. A white brick colonial on a quiet cul-de-sac. She told everyone it was ours. Her friends teased her about being the queen of the block. Her parents bragged about it at their country club. Natalie strutted through life like she was already crowned. And I let her. I signed the papers with a steady hand, always ensuring my name, and only mine, was on the official documents. Natalie never checked. She trusted the illusion so completely that she didn't even bother to look. She thought the house was the endgame. But for me, it was just the setup. The morning of closing day, I woke up before the alarm. My body hummed with adrenaline, though outwardly, I forced myself into calm movements. I shaved carefully, buttoned my shirt without a tremor, and tied my tie like it was any other day. But inside, every nerve was alive with anticipation. Months of waiting, pretending, and maneuvering were about to pay off. Natalie, meanwhile, hummed in the bathroom as she applied makeup. She was radiant, not because she loved me, but because she believed she was about to secure her prize. Her dress was carefully chosen, professional yet celebratory. She snapped a photo in the mirror, captioned it "Dream House Vibes," and posted it before we even left the apartment. At breakfast, she barely ate. Her phone was buzzing non-stop with messages from her friends, each one congratulating her as though she had already signed her name into history. Her parents texted as well, promising to meet us at the office. Natalie's energy was giddy, childlike, uncontainable. She kept rehearsing how she'd thank me, how she'd pose with the keys for Instagram, how she'd start moving boxes in that very night. And I sat across from her, sipping my coffee slowly, watching the performance of a lifetime. The office was bright and sterile, The kind of place where pens clicked nervously and contracts whispered under fingertips. Our realtor greeted us with wide smiles, ushering us into the conference room where stacks of papers waited. Natalie's parents arrived moments later, dressed smartly, their pride practically spilling onto the carpet. Frank clapped me on the back again, his voice booming as he said, "Today's the big day, son." Darlene kissed Natalie's cheek, beaming. "My baby, a homeowner at last. You're securing your future." Natalie's eyes shone, and she squeezed my hand under the table. "Our future," she corrected with deliberate sweetness. The attorney cleared his throat, laying out the documents, pointing to lines, explaining each section. I listened, nodded, signed where appropriate. Natalie leaned forward eagerly, asking questions about property taxes, mortgage schedules, the timeline for transferring utilities. She was meticulous in her curiosity about everything, except the one detail that mattered most. When the deed was placed in front of me, I signed with a flourish. The attorney slid the folder to Natalie. "And now you," he said. She picked up the pen, smiling broadly as she bent over the page. She signed her name with practiced elegance, even adding a tiny heart-shaped flourish at the end of her signature. She set the pen down with a satisfied sigh, looking up at her parents. "That's it. It's official." The attorney paused, glanced at her, then at me. "Actually, ma'am," he said carefully, "for the deed itself, only Grant's name is recorded. You've signed as a witness to the transaction." The silence that followed was almost physical. It pressed against the walls, thick and suffocating. Natalie blinked, her smile frozen halfway, her brain scrambling to catch up with the words. "What?" she whispered, a sharp edge creeping into her tone. The attorney, a seasoned man who'd probably seen every kind of client reaction, adjusted his glasses. "The deed and mortgage are in Grant's name alone. That was the arrangement he set up from the beginning. You're not a co-owner on this property." Her eyes darted to me, wide and disbelieving. "What is he talking about? This is our house. We agreed it would be in both our names." I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands calmly, and met her gaze. "No, Natalie. You agreed with yourself. I never promised that." Frank frowned, looking between us. "Hold on, what's going on here?" Natalie's face flushed crimson. She slammed her hand on the table. "This isn't funny, Grant. Fix it. Tell them to put my name on it." The attorney cleared his throat again. "I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. Ownership is based on legal documentation, not assumption. Unless both parties are listed from the start, the deed reflects only the signatory." Darlene gasped softly, covering her mouth. Frank leaned forward, his voice tight. "Grant, what are you pulling here?" I let the silence hang a moment longer before reaching into my folder. I pulled out a sheet of paper, folded neatly, and slid it across the table toward Natalie. She snatched it up, unfolding it with trembling hands. And there it was, the screenshot. The one she had accidentally sent me months ago, her own words staring back at her. "Once he buys the house, I'm gone." Her breath caught audibly. The color drained from her face. Frank snatched the paper from her, read it, and swore under his breath. Darlene sat back, stunned, her eyes flicking between her daughter and me. Natalie tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Finally, she managed a strangled, That's not what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like." I cut in, my voice calm, almost gentle. "You were never planning a future with me. You were planning a transaction. You thought once I signed, you'd walk away with half. But you miscalculated." Her chair scraped violently as she pushed back from the table. "You're insane. You're twisting things." Her voice rose, cracking under the strain. She turned desperately to her parents. "Tell him this isn't fair. Tell him he can't just." But Frank's face was carved from stone. He glared at her, holding the incriminating sheet like it was toxic. Darlene whispered her daughter's name, full of horror and disappointment. Natalie's mask shattered completely then. She shouted, cursed, even tried to grab the folder from the attorney's hands. He recoiled, clutching the documents protectively. The realtor looked mortified, trying to smooth the chaos with nervous words about keeping things professional. But the damage was irreparable. The meltdown grew worse. Natalie turned on me like a cornered animal, spewing venom, accusing me of betrayal, of manipulation, of cruelty. She said I had humiliated her, set her up, destroyed everything. Her voice echoed through the office halls, drawing curious glances from assistants and clients outside. And me? I just sat there, calm, unshaken. Every insult she hurled only reinforced the truth. I had seen her for who she really was, and I had beaten her at her own game. Finally, the attorney gathered the papers, placed them neatly into a folder, and slid them toward me. "Congratulations, Mr. Whitaker," he said firmly. "You're now the sole legal owner of this property." The words landed like a hammer. Natalie let out a strangled scream, one part fury and one part despair. Her parents looked as though the floor had vanished beneath them, and I stood, tucked the folder under my arm, and offered a polite smile to the room. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I think we're finished here." Outside the office, Natalie chased after me into the parking lot. She clutched my arm, nails digging into my sleeve. "You can't do this, Grant. You can't just cut me out. I've given you years of my life. This is my house, too." I shook her off with controlled strength. "No, Natalie. It's mine. You gave me nothing but lies. And now, you get nothing back." Her face twisted, tears finally spilling as anger curdled into desperation. She begged then, whispered promises, swore she'd change, even tried to kiss me. But I saw through every move. They were the same tactics she'd used to manipulate me before, just stripped bare and frantic now. I got into my car, started the engine, and rolled down the window long enough to leave her with one final line. "You wanted a house. Well, you got one. Just not the way you planned." And then I drove off, watching in the mirror as she shrank in the distance, screaming my name in a parking lot she'd walked into so smugly only an hour earlier. But the story didn't end there. Natalie's meltdown left ripples. Her parents called me later that week, voices heavy with shame, apologizing for ever doubting me. They admitted they had encouraged her entitlement, never realizing how far she would take it. I accepted their apology but made it clear, Natalie and I were done. Meanwhile, word spread quickly among her friends. The screenshots circulated quietly, passed from phone to phone, stripping her of the image she'd so carefully curated. The woman who bragged about her dream house was now infamous for trying to con her fiancé and failing spectacularly. And me? I went back to the house papers, reviewing every line with satisfaction. My name stood alone, strong and untouchable. The fortress I had built was mine, and mine alone. When I pulled away from that office parking lot, folder on the seat beside me, I felt something strange. It wasn't triumph. Not exactly. It was a clarity I hadn't experienced in years, a sharp, clean break from the fog I'd been living in. For months, Natalie had been the center of every plan, every sacrifice, every calculation. Now she was nothing more than a speck in my rearview mirror. I expected her to vanish quietly, to slink off and regroup with Troy or whatever other backup she had lined up. But I underestimated how desperate people become when their schemes collapse in broad daylight. The first wave came within hours. My phone buzzed with calls, texts, voicemails. Natalie's number flashed over and over, sometimes begging, sometimes cursing. She left a particularly dramatic message about me, ruining her life and stealing her future. I muted the phone, tossed it on the counter, and let the storm pass unanswered. By evening, her parents had called too. Darlene's voice trembled with embarrassment as she explained Natalie was having a difficult time processing everything. Frank, more blunt, asked me point blank if I was really ending the engagement over this. I told him the truth. I wasn't ending anything. Natalie had ended it herself the moment she planned her escape. I just cut the cord before she could pull it. There was silence on the line, then a weary sigh. Frank muttered that he couldn't argue, but Natalie didn't give up. The following week, she showed up at my apartment. Her mascara streaked, her hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the polished, smug woman from closing day. She pounded on my door until neighbors peeked out, hissing my name through the crack. When I finally opened it, she launched into a rehearsed speech about forgiveness, about second chances, about how we could still make this work. I listened in silence until she broke down sobbing, sliding to her knees on the welcome mat. She clutched my hands, insisting she had made a mistake, that the screenshot was out of context, that she had been venting to a friend and never meant it. But lies sound different once you've heard the truth. I pulled my hands back, looked her straight in the eye, and told her she wasn't welcome. I shut the door with her still crying in the hallway. That was the last time I saw her in person for months. But the world has a way of keeping you updated on people you'd rather forget. Through whispers and social media, I learned what became of her. She moved in with Troy shortly after our split. On the surface, she tried to spin it as a rebound romance, but anyone paying attention could see it had been lined up long before. For a while, she flaunted the relationship online, posting photos of dinners, nights out, weekends in cheap hotels she pretended were getaways. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Troy wasn't me. He didn't work overtime, didn't shoulder burdens, didn't provide stability. He was charming in bursts, but reckless, always chasing shortcuts. Within 3 months, they were fighting publicly in bars, friends whispering about debt collectors calling his phone, her parents wringing their hands over the man their daughter had chosen. By summer, she was back in her childhood bedroom, Troy long gone, leaving her with nothing but unpaid bills and a reputation she couldn't scrub clean. Meanwhile, I thrived. The house was mine, every inch of it. I spent weekends fixing it up, painting walls, ripping out old carpet, turning it into a place that finally felt like my future instead of a stage for someone else's ambitions. I rented out the basement to a quiet tenant, the income covering most of the mortgage. The stability I had dreamed of wasn't tied to Natalie anymore. It was tied to me, and me alone. Work improved too. Freed from the drain of her endless demands, I threw myself into new projects. My boss noticed, promotions followed, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was climbing without someone clinging to my back. Friends who had grown distant during the relationship drifted back into my life. Over beers one night, one admitted he had never trusted Natalie, that she always seemed like she was waiting for something better. I laughed then, not out of bitterness, but out of recognition. He had seen what I hadn't, and I finally understood. But karma wasn't finished with Natalie. Months later, I received a letter, one of those formal envelopes with her handwriting scrawled on the corner. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside was a desperate plea. She explained she was drowning in debt, her credit ruined, her parents cutting her off financially. She asked for help, just a little support until she got back on her feet. The audacity almost made me laugh. She had once plotted to abandon me after I bought a house, and now she was begging at the door of the very man she tried to discard. I didn't respond. Instead, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the same folder as the infamous screenshot. Proof, in case I ever doubted myself, that I had made the right choice. Not long after, I heard the final chapter. A mutual acquaintance told me Natalie had been evicted from a small apartment she tried to rent after moving out of her parents' place. She hadn't been able to keep up with payments. Her friends, those who once egged her on, were tired of her drama, slowly peeling away until she was left alone. Troy had vanished entirely. Rumor had it he'd left town to escape debt collectors. Natalie, the woman who once bragged about her dream house, now had no house, no fiancé, no fallback. She was working a string of temporary jobs, barely scraping by, her social media scrubbed of the glamorous life she once pretended to have. And me? I slept soundly at night in a home that was entirely mine. One evening, months after the dust had settled, I stood in the backyard watching the sun sink behind the trees. The air was quiet, peaceful. I thought about the chaos of that closing day, the screaming in the parking lot, the desperate pounding on my apartment door. It felt distant now, like a bad movie I had once been forced to sit through. The house was solid beneath my feet, the mortgage secure, my name carved into every document that mattered. And Natalie? She was out there somewhere, still running from consequences she had created. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't love her either. She was simply a lesson, etched deep into my life. Trust is a gift, not a currency. And when someone treats it like a transaction, they don't deserve to hold it. I never married quickly after that. I dated, cautiously, learning to recognize red flags I once ignored. I learned to listen less to words and more to actions. And I kept the screenshot, not as a scar, but as a reminder. Silence can be stronger than confrontation, patience sharper than revenge. Because in the end, I didn't destroy Natalie. She destroyed herself. I just let her walk into the trap she had set for me. And when the door finally closed, it was on her. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.